Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Welcome to the MIT Forum for Equity. My name is Jody Ray Spotted Bear, and I am a 2020-21 MIT Knight Science Journalism Fellow and founder of the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance, and I'll moderate today's event. We'll do a land acknowledgement, and I'm really glad to see that the land acknowledgements are taking root across the United States. So I'm going to do the land acknowledgement on behalf of MIT, which acknowledges that Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we host this event is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. So we welcome all of our participants' questions, and I thank everybody for being with us today. And we just want to say that as a reminder that the conversations that we're having today on equity are often difficult, but we all benefit from an active listening and a respectful communication. At this time, I'd like to welcome Winona LaDuke, Executive Director of Honor the Earth and a 1983 Community Fellow for the MIT Department of Urban Studies and Planning. LaDuke is widely known as the 2000 vice presidential candidate on the Green Party ticket with Ralph Nader, but we also equally recognize Winona in her role as a leader in the issues of cultural-based sustainable development strategies, renewable energy, and sustainable food systems. She is also one of the leaders in the work of protecting indigenous plants and heritage foods from patenting and genetic engineering. Today, Winona is going to will share her vision today for an Indigenous Green New Deal, or a more agile, decentralized, renewable community, our renewable economy, less reliant on international supply chains and fossil fuels. She'll also discuss her new book, To Be a Water Protector, Rise of the Wendigo Slayers. Welcome, Winona. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes, I see you now. Yes, very nice to see you. Thank you for having me here. And it's nice to be back at MIT.
Yeah, Winona, so just, we're just looking forward to hearing you share about 15 minutes or so, if you would, a little longer if you want, about what's on your plate. I know that you're always have a very busy schedule and you're en route over there on the Great Plains of Montana. And I'm just glad that you have the time to talk with us today.
No, thank you for inviting me. You know, as you know, Jody, you know, since I left MIT, I moved back to my reservation, the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, and I've, you know, 40 years, close to 40 years, well, we'll say 27 or so, but, you know, 37 years. And, you know, working really on how you rebuild a local, sustainable Indigenous economy, because it seems like that stuff's kind of long-term, you know, and I've sadly, I've spent a lot of my life fighting what I would call stupid projects, stupid ideas, like all kind of big pipelines and power plants and mines, places they shouldn't be. You know, and what it always brings me back to is like, why don't we do stuff that makes sense? Why don't we be sensible? Why don't we, you know, figure out how, you know, Mike Wiggins from Bad River, the tribal chairman there, says, one day he said to me, he said, seems like people don't want to hang out another 1,000 years or so. And, you know, and it's true. I mean, like, what if we wanted to hang out 1,000 years? Like, why wouldn't we try to figure that out? So, you know, up in my reservation, you know, we've been working on, you know, since we all locked down with COVID in March, you know, I went home and, you know, I had grand plans to fly around the country like the rest of us. And I didn't, you know, and I quarantined in my farm with a bunch of youth that were no longer in school. That's probably a lot of people did that, right? So I have like 8, you know, 14-year-olds that moved in with me and the horses. And we just, went about restoring what we had started. And so we went to the sugar bush. And, I think, as you know, we live in the place where, you get syrup from a tree and rice from a lake. We have like creators country here. So we went to the sugar bush and everybody was locked up, but we was in the woods. It was awesome, and we made that medicine, and then we planted our gardens, and turns out everybody else planted their gardens too. I mean, what did they say, like a quadrupling of seed sales nationally? Like everybody was like, oh, the food system is failing. And what we learned during the beginning of COVID is like, turns out we buy a lot of stuff overseas, and so it gets something like a shrimp that's raised in Scotland, and it gets deveined in China and shipped to a Walmart near you. Oh my gosh, that makes no sense, right? You have these globalized food systems that we've been taught, and academia has talked about the economies of scale. Well, it turns out those systems are not agile and they don't work when things fall apart, and so what we saw is that, with the pandemic, we couldn't get stuff from China. And so you had like all of this stuff, whether it was pharmaceuticals or car parts or, everybody was busy there. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh no, we don't got that. So what if you try to figure out how to make things yourself? I mean, in this country, we used to make stuff, not just buy it. What if we made stuff that was important and didn't make stuff that we didn't need anymore? That's kind of what I'm thinking, kind of common sense stuff. And so, the first thing you want to do is get local with your food system. And so, we like quadrupled our food production, and you look out there across this country, and indigenous nations have been working to restore food systems for years. And now is the time when we like dug in, literally. Like I'm here on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation today, and this project Yellowbird, they did 40 gardens. I mean, everything has increased so dramatically, and people got like a live, a live show on how to spiral squash. I mean, these food traditions that are so significant, they are the way to go. And for me, I planted all kinds of stuff. I specialize in corn, beans, squash, potatoes, Jerusalem artichokes, and tobacco, and then hemp. And I'll talk about the hemp in a minute. But what I noticed is that I'm trying to see what's going to adapt in climate change. So I grew some Mandan varieties. You'll be happy to hear that, because they're tough. Those are some tough corn varieties, and they're for the drier area. And last year in climate change, we were like bobbing for potatoes. We aren't supposed to bob for potatoes, but this year it was like so dry. And so good thing I planted the Mandan varieties. They just flourished. They just flourished. Thank you, Jody, for your corn. But that's a lot of what I'm interested in is like, what's post-petroleum agriculture look like? And all of our plants are like pre and post-petroleum. They didn't ever need fossil fuels. They didn't need to be slathered with anything. And, a lot of horse manure, that's what I use. And, just really, really great crops this year, a lot of hard work. But, what I did is back in the day, I don't know if you know this, but when I left Harvard, I was the principal of a survival school. I don't know why they hired me at 23 years old to be a principal of a school, but, it's just barely older than some of them super seniors. But, when they, and now I feel like I'm doing that again. Cause like, what do you want to teach your kids? They could be super smart, but if they can't grow food, I don't know, so we started working on that again. And then, my tribe, like a lot of other tribes, we learned long ago that no one's really going to fix stuff for you. The feds certainly ain't, the state ain't. And like half the time our tribe is like, scraping pennies to try to meet some basic Head Start needs. So we redoubled our work on renewable energy. And so, my organization, Honor the Earth, has been building these solar thermal panels. And, a lot of this audience is from MIT. It's like really low tech compared to what MIT does. But just say you had like 8x4, square block, and then inside it, it's like you got plexiglass on the outside and it's dark in there. And so when the sun heats that up on the south facing wall, it gets hot and you get warm. That's basically what happens, right? Blows hair inside. And so, for my community, just like yours, Jody, I actually think you guys bought some panels from us out there in North Dakota. We're cold as heck in the winter, but we're still sunny. So why wouldn't you reduce your heating bill by 20% by putting on some solar thermal panels. That would make sense. Like, why should we keep paying fossil fuel companies when we could use the sun? So, my community just started doing more because we realized that, things are not going to get better. Climate change is bringing more crisis upon us. And, as we look out there, as well as I do, that we have like catastrophes of biblical proportions. I don't know what else to describe. I feel like that's where we live. And so, the old days, we learned to pray pretty hard, do that. But then also, we got agency. We can make some change. And so, we're figuring out how to grow foods. And, even the UN and all them scientists around the world are saying that these indigenous crops are faster to adapt because our plants are smart. A GMO corn variety isn't smart. It doesn't have a brain. It has some DNA stuck in it by Syngenta. So how could a plant like that figure out how to adapt when the weather changes? It can't, So these indigenous varieties are resilient. These indigenous varieties, feed our people much higher nutritional value. And then, so we're working on this, and then I moved into hemp. And I used to say hemp and people kind of back away from me like I was just smoking a lot of pot or something, and I was like, no, for years, people would tell me about this, the great Alex Whiteplume and John Trudell, a great Dakota philosopher. He'd always say, hemp is the way, hemp is the way. And I was thinking, oh man, those guys just probably want to get high or something. I was super judgmental. And here I am. And 5 years growing hemp. And what I'm interested in is, I call hemp the new green revolution. That's what I call it. It's the new green revolution. And I claim that, and for us, why I say that? Because if you're, at MIT, that Norman Borlaug from the University of Minnesota was called the father of the green revolution, Norman Borlaug. And what did that bring us? A big increase in food production, a big increase in fossil fuels, a big increase in contamination, and not move more food security. The fact is that 70% of the food that's, eaten today is produced by farmers like me. People produce food in their communities, and it, and then America wastes a whole bunch of food, but we leave that. But my point is that he did all that, and now we find out that the green revolution isn't so great. In fact, the soil, we're losing our soil, we're losing our water, the crops are being owned by multinational corporations. And so what about hemp? This is what I'm going to tell you is that everybody is focused on the legalization of cannabis, and I'm 100% behind that. But what, the hemp economy itself? There was a guy who told me once, this is what he said to me. He said, we had a choice about 70 years ago, between a carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy. We had a choice between a carbohydrate economy and a hydrocarbon economy, and we made the wrong choice. And I just want you to think of how close those words are, hydrocarbon and carbohydrate, but the carbohydrate economy was hemp. Henry Ford made a car out of hemp that fueled on hemp. Anything you do with fossil fuels, you could do that with hemp, and you could do it better. First of all, some things you just don't want to do anymore. They're dumb. But, you take things like, fabric. Well, so today I'm wearing my cotton shirt. This here, great. See my nice cotton shirts from Mexico. But, this shirt is cotton, but cotton's about 4% of the world's agriculture and 24% of the world's chemicals. Why would you do that? And it uses about 5 times as much water as hemp. So, and polyesters, for those of us that are trying to get into our spandex, well, all that stuff is fossil fuels, and so now these guys like H&M and Target or Target or whatever, fast clothing, fast fashion, those guys, it's like a 50 million pounds worth of fossil fuels annually. That they're using, so just time to move on. So hemp, you can make, fabric out of it. One thing a couple years ago I learned is, did you know that the word canvas comes from cannabis? The word canvas comes from cannabis, and so if you just think about all those blue tarps that they cover boats with, all of that stuff that they use that's now made of fossil fuels, you could do it all. And so I'm interested in the textile economy of hemp. I'm interested in the paper economy of hemp. to cut back clear cutting. I'm certainly interested in the hempcrete, you know, and I was really trying to get some guys at MIT to help me think through some of that, you know, because you're a smart bunch over there. So let me know, you know, if y'all want to work on some of this hemp for us. And, you know, hempcrete, that sequesters carbon, and it's, you know, it's not load bearing, but you can frame it and use it, and you could replace a lot of concrete. And if concrete, like they say that concrete, if it was a country, is the third largest source of CO2 emissions of the world. If concrete was a country, it'd be right after the US and China. So like, what if we just quit doing so much concrete? And what if we like moved along and evolved? That's what I want. That's the new green revolution. The new green revolution is a transformation. And the thing about it is that it's a new economy. So, you know, indigenous people and people of color are trying to get in at seat at the table at these other economies. Well, this is a brand new economy. US is the largest importer of hemp in the world, and we don't make it. You know, so what if we did it? And so my interest is in building an intertribal hemp cooperative. That's what I want to do, because I can't grow enough hemp to make enough canvas for this country. You know, all of these tribes, though, you know, in our area between you and me, Jody, those are land-rich tribes, you know, and there's good potential there for this. And I know North Dakota Hemp Growers Association is keen, but so I've been on this, and I'm trying to figure out the processes and, you know, this discovery of hemp. I just want to say is, you know, is that film, Who Killed the Electric Car? I don't know if you ever heard of that film, but, you know, it's just about the conspiracy. And I was like, same thing with hemp, you know, just destroyed, and all the equipment was destroyed. And so it's kind of like reconstructing a crime scene 70 years later and figuring out what technology is appropriate. How would you process this without chemicals, and how did they do it for 10,000 years, and how do you scale it? So my little organization is called Winona's Hemp. So I'm growing cannabis, having a great time. And so during this pandemic, I've been home like you. You know, I used to fly. I tell people, you know, I used to fly. And it sounds like a mythological thing, you know, I used to fly. And now I stay home and go to my garden and I work. And but you know, this pandemic, this has changed our world. I really like what Erin Dottie Roy says. I don't know if you ever read her writing, but she says, you know, one of the things she said that I really like, she says, talks about a pandemic as a portal. She says, in the history of the world, pandemics transform our world. You know, they transform societies. This one is no different. It brings society to our knees. You know, and in that, you know, you have an opportunity to walk through a new portal. It's a portal between one world and the next. And the question she poses is, do you want to take your dirty skies, your avarice, your hatred, your data banks, your dirty rivers, or do you want to walk through clean? And I'm all ready. I'm all ready for the just transition. I'm all ready for the new green revolution. You know, I'm all ready. And I know Joe Biden ain't quite up for it yet, but we'll work on him. You know, in the meantime, you know, I see tribes like my tribe or Red Lake, you know, I mean, the single largest solar project in North Dakota is at Standing Rock, right? You know, certainly wasn't going to happen with those North Dakota rural co-ops. So to me, you know, we have this opportunity to make this transition, and I'm rolling up my sleeves and working on it. And I'm just happy to talk to all the brilliance at MIT and share my humble ideas on the next economy with you. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of this. And I got so much, you know, I've been at this for a while. And, you know, the thing is just, you know, I'm busy minding my own beeswax. You know, I don't know how else to say this, but I was down there farming and doing solar panels. And then I look over there, and then this Governor Walz this week just approved this giant tar sands pipeline, line 3. You know, I was like, wait, how'd that happen? You know, we're all here in a pandemic, you know, major crisis. And why'd you approve a tar sands pipeline, you know, at the end of the fossil fuel era? I mean, get real. You and I know that, I mean, at economics class at Harvard, they didn't teach us what happens when oil goes to minus $38 a barrel. You know, they didn't teach us that one, right? You know, the economics of fossil fuels is dead. You know, it's just time to move on. And, you know, I see your governor out there in North Dakota. What did he do? Spend $16 billion of COVID money to help the fracking industry out? I was like, come on, Doug. You know, come on, Doug. That's like, you must have lost your mind. But anyway, that's kind of a regional thing, I guess. But it's like time to move on. No opportunity like the present, so I'm ready to be here. Thanks for like inviting me to talk to y'all though some. So
Sure. So Winona, speaking of governors over here in the Dakotas, we have a question. Wondering what you think. Were you shocked at all when South Dakota, which is a heavily red Republican state, that they legalized recreational cannabis this month? And do
do they
you
do recreational or medicinal?
recreational?
Are you kidding me?
No.
Oh, I know. Well, the thing is that so I was just visiting my mother in Oregon. When I go to check out the dispensary, it's all old people there. It's not like a lot of young potheads. It's like a bunch of older people that got owies and are sick of taking all the medicines. I mean, it's a really great medicine. And yes, it made me laugh with South Dakota because like between South Dakota and North Dakota, I can't figure out who's most backwards usually, I mean, you know exactly what I mean. It's like, but South Dakota usually takes it like that, Trump rally and,
Yeah.
I mean, all that stuff. South Dakota usually takes it. So yes, I was quite surprised when they voted that. And I was looking at Minnesota saying like, what's up, Minnesota? You're acting all like pious and like you're advanced, but look at that. South Dakota's even moving ahead,
Montana passed recreational cannabis too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a proponent of all of it, I mean, and everybody is like really focused on recreational cannabis, which is great. But, that's a really great thing. But I want to change the materials economy. That's what I want to do. I want to transform us into a post-petroleum world, with a whole bunch of other people. That's the thing is like my little grand ideas are like millions of other people's grand ideas too. And this economy, it takes all of us. It's not like, if I have a little boutique hemp spot, that's not going to change it. So.
Yeah, I'm real curious, Winona, as somebody who got into the hemp business, how difficult was it or how easy was it to get your seeds, get the land, do you need to irrigate that land? How can your average family tribe get into the hemp business? What are the costs? Is it?
Jody, I mean, I think that one of the problems we have is that people they want a replacement for casinos, right? Or they want the silver bullet for their economy. And, I saw so many farmers go out there and put in acres and acres of CBD plants, gonna make $1 million, lost their butts. Because you know what I think is that you got to treat this plant with respect. If you want to apply the paradigm of the industrial agricultural economy and all of that profit to it, it's not going to work out. Not going to work out. I'm proud to say that my plants, I grew CBD varieties too, but my plants, the furthest north and the largest of any of them that they saw, and I grow 50 plants and I grow them for medicine for my cousin who's, makes our herbal medicines. And she, uses the CBDs with her other, her arnica and her, St. John's wort and all her, magical things, so I think it's approach too. It's a slow thing because the entire economy was destroyed. The hemp economy was basically plowed under in the 1930s with the prohibition. And so all of the technology and the knowledge was criminalized. And so we don't know how to do it. So I'm like looking at there and I've been at this, as I said, for 5 years, and I go to these workshops and try to learn. And like, first I had to learn what a decorticator was, and so a hemp plant is like, inside is hurd of the stalk and the outside is the fiber. And that's what I wanted, is the fiber. And then there's the flower and the seed. So many uses for this plant. The seed is like super high in amino acids and I don't know, all kind of good nutritional stuff. That's hemp hearts, and then the flower, of course, that's what, most people are interested in the bud, but my hemp plants, you can't get high off of, but then, but the herd itself, we saw this guy up in North Dakota, or, we're trying to get the equipment or figure out what there is to make paper, or, how you bust up this, how you transform these plants into something that you can make a materials economy of. So I've been tracking down equipment, and going to places and, listening to all kind of snake oil salesmen, all kind, You're going to make $1 million, give me 6 million. I got this equipment for you. It'll do everything except for sliced bread. It's not out there. I'm going to tell you that right now. It is not out there. And what we need is technology that makes sense. It's in Europe, most likely. And we were planning to go look at some mills in Europe, but they closed, it's closed down. But North Dakota, has perhaps the best potential of any state. North Dakota and South Dakota too, because the flax industry is almost the same as the hemp industry in terms of technology. And linen, the stuff that they make fine canvas out of, North Dakota is burning millions of acres of linen stalks, of flax, and just taking the seeds. Like North Dakota doesn't know what to do with it. And I'm saying, North Dakota, let's go. Let's do some hemp. Let's make some things. So I want to build, I want to rebuild an economy that makes sense in this country. I want it to be localized and fair. I want it to be just, and I want to be at the table. I don't want to be like invited after they make the mess. I'm done, and you look out there and people are like, who's going to take the leadership in this? And it really needs to be all of us. We need to we need to make this happen, because if you're waiting, the political system, I saw this article, I don't know what was in the New York Times or something, where the Columbian newspaper was saying, who's a banana republic now? Did you see that? Who's a banana republic now? Let's be leaders. Let's be leaders, and a lot of them are going to come from communities, and then let's elect them. We certainly got out some votes this time, so.
Okay, so we've got questions coming in, Winona, from people that are tuned in or listening to this. So here's one question for you. Would any of the Indigenous groups that you work with, would any of the Indigenous groups with which you work have an interest in new transportation modalities, incorporating electric power or autonomous driving? And would this help ameliorate any of the pollution or transportation needs?
What I'm interested in is the solutionary rail. That's what I'm interested in. A solutionary rail is an electric, first of all, we have a rail system that's like, I believe William Kunstler referred to it as an embarrassment to Bulgaria. We don't really have a rail system that works. Anybody who has traveled, the privilege of travel like I used to, people have train systems that work in other countries, just not this one, right? And so we need to rebuild the train system. That's what the backbone of this country should be in terms of transportation. And then when we rebuild that train system, we need to rebuild it with rails, and the rails need to be electric, because we have 1% electric rails, while 65% of the Italian rails are electric. I think 50% in France and Germany. That's far more efficient. Now, I was at Harvard a couple of years ago and I went to see Mara Prentice, and she's a professor of physics there, and she talked about the new energy revolution. She pointed out that a combustion engine is only 16% efficient, and an electric engine is 65% efficient. So what kind of stupid country would hang out with a 16% efficient engine? That doesn't make any sense. We want to move on. But the way to move things is really by train, and I say that because what I know is what you know is that you just think of the physics of it. Like, what do you want? Is metal on metal or rubber on the road? You want metal on metal. Efficiency. And you want to move stuff, in a scale. And so solutionary rail, that's an idea that came out of the Backbone campaign, and it basically says we're going to electrify the rails. And when we electrify the rails, we're going to power them on renewables. And those renewables could be actually, you could direct current, this rail. You could just run it directly off of renewables. And, your reservation out there is really windy. Everybody to the west is windy. And, I don't know if the rail goes through you, but it sure goes through Blackfeet, sure goes through a lot of reservations. And, as we talk about land justice, let's talk about the return of those railroad right-of-ways, through these reservations. Those should be ours, and we should have a hand and a right to this new rail system. So that's what I'd like to see. I'm less interested in the automation of the trucking industry. I'm more interested in focusing on the solutionary rail idea and building a rail system. That's what I'm interested in.
Okay, now in your work, Winona, you deal a lot with water rights and the preservation of water and holding into account the sacredness of those uh, natural resources. So we have a question from one of the listeners about what do you think needs to be done to create a more equitable water rights system between the federal government and tribes? Is that anything you've thought about?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have the question of rights is something that I find challenging because we're really about rights and we're not about responsibilities. You know, and what I see is that the rights-based analysis often, ends us up in the place where we are today, where a lot of people want their allocation. And in the end, there's no water in the river, and so it's really about the right of the river to me. It's about the rights of Mother Earth and it's the rights of the river. And so you look at the vision of tribes like the Yuroks in Northern California who passed as the rights of the Klamath River. You look at similarly in New Zealand, and so, and our tribe passed the right, a declaration on the rights of wild rice. From my perspective, we need to be more about protecting and preserving and, fixing up, trying to repair the mess that is made and figuring out how to, who's going to get the last bit, the last one. I mean, I'm looking at northern Minnesota and, so who wants the last moose? Who wants the last moose? That's not what I'm about. I'm about, let's get the moose back, And so to me, certainly the prior rights of tribes are essential and need to be not only recognized, but honored. But in addition to that, the rivers and the waters themselves need to be respected.
You actually address this issue in a chapter in your book. Let's see. It might be the telescope in Moana, but anyway, you talk about this parallel universe of corporate rights versus human rights, and you just mentioned New Zealand as one of the countries, and you're a witness to the change in legal jurisprudence on more countries, probably not really here in the United States yet, but other countries that are, recognizing that mountains are living beings and they do have, as much rights or should have more rights than a corporation. Do you want to talk about that chapter a little more? Or
I don't have the chapter in front of me, but basically, what's happened in this country is that the rights of corporations supersede the rights of humans. And that's problematic, and so a corporation is considered basically a natural person under the law, which makes no sense, and we certainly saw that in the DAPL battle at Standing Rock, where the rights of Energy Transfer Partners superseded the rights of the Standing Rock tribe and the water protectors, and that makes absolutely no sense in any kind of a coherent jurisprudence system. And so my suggestions is that the United States needs to evolve, and it needs to evolve past the rights of corporations. To be honest, if a corporation was a person, it would have a soul. A corporation does not have a soul. It's not a person. That's the reality. And, in the bigger picture, it gets back to this, reaffirmation of the rights of nature and the rights, the rights of beings to exist, and modifying legal systems. I mean, I'm in these battles right now for water quality. I mean, there's nothing that makes sense in the arguments that a corporation could actually protect your water. They have no interest in it.
So how do we get past recognizing or upholding the rights of corporations versus the rights of a river or the rights of ecosystems? How do we make that part of a national conversation?
Well, you got to start somewhere, and I think tribes provide leadership. I mean, the fact is that, if the problems we're talking about today, if you think that the solution to them is in the paradigm which created the problems, we're wrong. This paradigm cannot solve these problems. We need to get outside of the box, that we are in, with all due respect, MIT, but, I remember that I was, when I was an undergraduate at Harvard, you know, the fine arts department is where you found European art, and indigenous art you found in anthropology. You know, and that valuation still exists today, that there's some kind of a scientific paradigm that makes this work. You know, even the United Nations says that corporations must die if we're going to continue. I mean, if we kept upholding the rights of corporations, like the Enbridge Corporation. I mean, 2 largest oil spills on US mainland, Enbridge. You know, and I'm looking at 2 governors at the same time. Governor Whitmer of Michigan pulls the easement and says you got 180 days to stop the flow under the Straits of Mackinac, because you've got a pipeline that was put in the 1950s and it's going to break. And the public trust doctrine requires that I speak on behalf of the public, you know, and the water. So she said no to Enbridge, line 5. In comparison, the governor of Minnesota somehow believes that Enbridge is going to solve his problems, you know, and give us new jobs. I said the 23 jobs that Enbridge will give us at the end of this pipeline battle, you know, we will employ more people in my tribe doing renewable energy than Enbridge will on a pipeline, you know, and so it is a paradigm shift as to, you know, what we're doing and where we are going. And I'm like you, Jody. I mean, you know, I raised a lot of kids, and I feel like what we need is more problem solvers and less problem makers. And that's what we need in public policy. You know, don't give me more problems, give me some solutions, you know?
Okay, you know, speaking of paradigm shifts, we're seem to be within that realm with the current pandemic. So here's a question about how has COVID exacerbated economic disparities in Native American communities?
Well, you know, certainly the trickle down of the COVID relief money didn't happen. You know, a lot of tribes are just barely, you know, scraping by, and a lot of the, you know, the circumstances we faced with inadequate health services. You know, I'm at Northern Cheyenne and they told me that 30 elders died.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we lost a lot of people and we're going to lose more,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because of this. And so to me, you know, all of that is worsened. You know, the fact that the president could get well from COVID, you know, he had like $1 million worth of medical care, you know, most of us. And certainly with COVID, we know that people of color are the most impacted, you know, at this, and, you know, so it certainly has worsened a lot of the health conditions and the challenges. And, you know, on the other hand, you know, I think that tribes have, because of tribal sovereignty, have taken some smarter moves than states, like take Cheyenne River, you know, blocking off their borders, Pine Ridge blocking off their borders from the state of South Dakota, where no one wears a mask from what I can see, right? You know, and Red Lake closed off their borders too. You know, so tribes have said, you know, we're not doing this, because they looked at the Navajo case and they saw, you know, what a disaster that is, you know. So, you know, we have learned, and you know, this is, you know, I don't want to say we're a post-apocalyptic people, but we are. We have the genetics of having survived an apocalypse already, you know, and so we're, you know, I'm not gonna say, you know, we're gonna pray hard. And most people in my community, you know what they did? You know, they just hunkered down with their wild rice and deer. You know, they're like, we're not going to town. We don't like them anyway.
Well, speaking of food sovereignty, we have a question related to that. So there's apparently an organization called Azentive that said they're aware of, communicate and coordinate with many indigenous bands that are working on food sovereignty, environmental justice, economic development solutions. They said, but there seems to be little productive collaboration. So how can tribal leaders get on the same page of putting nature's rights and human rights first to create this movement that you were laying out? So we're kind of backtracking a little bit to the...
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, like a lot of tribes, you know, each tribe is managing their own crises. You know, I mean, we're in major crises management now. There's no question about it. And so it's hard to see clearly when you're in a crisis, right? You know, and so you have that reality. And then you have these collaborations that are being built. Like, I don't know who that organization is, but, you know, our guys, our solar guys, went and did a training at Net Lake and over at Leech Lake, you know, masked up and put in some solar. You know, during this time too, we're just moving ahead with a lot of this, a lot of this grow, this work in our communities. And so, we're going to do our best. I mean, we all got to do our best, but this is really a time, there's not a person listening to this that hasn't had to go deep during this time. I had to really think about what I needed and what I didn't need. If it meant going to town, I was like, no, I don't really need that. Right? I mean, all of that, and really thinking about what is wise and so now is the time to, it's a transformational time. And as we look out there, I mean, Jody, how many years did we spend trying to get them Columbus statues down?
Yeah.
Right? Right. And all them statues are gone, along with them conquistador statues and those Confederate statues. They tumbled, so, and then that Redskins thing, oh my God. So I'm saying is like social movements are pushing and surging, despite all of the voter suppression. We still got that guy out, although he won't leave the throne, and, in this moment, we just keep pushing. That's what I say. Keep pushing. Let's make this change, and that's what we got to do.
Okay, so one of the people asking a question is, well, I would ask you, Winona, to reiterate your vision of a Green New Deal, and then, what advice do you have for MIT to contribute to your vision of a Green New Deal?
Okay, so, sometimes I call this the Sitting Bull plan, because I had like the Marshall Plan, and I was like the Sitting Bull plan because he was such a great political leader, and he said, let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. This is not just one person. This is all of us with some good thoughts. Books like Drawdown by Paul Hawken, or Collected Stories. There's people have been working on this transition for years, never seen the light of day, but all across the world, people are rebuilding local food systems and making them resilient, because it turns out shipping shrimp from China, after it's gone through Scotland doesn't make sense. And so you need to rebuild local food systems. You need to, not only cut your meat, but your meat needs to free range. That's what you need. You got to eliminate the CAFOs because they make us sick. You need to, build food systems that are organic, because organic farming sequesters carbon. That's what smart people would do. You need to cut your fossil fuels. Now, that's not just a pandemic thing. That's like quit that stuff. And we already did by 10% during the pandemic. And I'm just saying, just keep going. Just keep going. And, I live in northern Minnesota. And you know what I see coming in? I see wind turbine parts coming in anytime I drive on the highways up there. And they're coming in, and they're coming into the port of Duluth, because that's the furthest inland port. And then they're going to Nebraska or South Dakota or Minnesota, because the next economy of renewable energy is growing. That's what's happening. It's like, Exxon used to be at the top, right? They aren't even in the top 10 anymore. Who's at the top 10? Google, Amazon, Jeff Bezos, he's like the richest guy in the world. Times change. Read the writing on the wall. Those guys are going renewable. So just do that, and figure out how to deal with the batteries, because we don't want to invade any more countries for lithium. Turns out that you can make batteries out of hemp. You can make batteries out of hemp. And you guys at MIT, you should figure that stuff out. I'm working with some guys that are working on that, but we need to like move the renewables economy into stuff that doesn't, you don't need like blood diamonds for your wind turbines, you need that transition. So move towards renewables, use less, for crying out loud. I mean, they say we waste 57% of our power between point of origin and point of consumption. Why would you want to waste so much power? And like, Boston, I mean, they're talking about new pipes. I'm saying fix your old pipes. I mean, I was looking at some pictures that Duke University put up there of the gas mains in Boston, and they should all just explode. But don't go light your cigarette there. I mean, you got leaks everywhere. So fix your stuff, make it more efficient, do that. And then move into like things like, hemp, the hemp economy, replace the materials economy with a hemp economy. And then do really smart stuff like these guys in Montana, Bayern Brewery. I don't know if you ever saw them. They're Missoula. You know what they do? They wash bottles. Oh yeah, they wash bottles. So imagine if you took all your Angry Orchard, that's what I like, Angry Orchard, or maybe you're drinking, some designer beer. And instead of crushing that bottle and pretending it's going to get recycled, because it ain't going to get recycled, what if you went and you and you made something like that you just washed the bottle. And, so that's what we need. And you manufacture appropriately here. You change your food, energy, transportation systems. And I'm actually working on a new book on this. And I'm hoping to just release a shorter booklet on it, because no time like the present, but I'm not the first one thinking of this. And I'm just saying that in the center of it is justice. You can't keep the same paradigm, land back. The Boy Scouts are going bankrupt. They should return all their land they took from us. Land grab universities, how about a little bit of transition there? I understand Cornell is one of the biggest land grabbers. Let us talk about what land, these land acknowledgements. That's a good start, but how about land back? I'm just going to go out there and say it, because we could pretend, but we want justice in the next economy, and everything is, all the opportunity is there. Like even cannabis, this in LA, there's a guy working on Kareem Webb, I think his name is, making sure that the dispensaries are owned by people of color, because right now the cannabis industry is like, 80% white men. Not this time, not this time. Let's make sure some people of color own the cannabis industry. So let's do this together. The next economy is not about competition. It's about cooperation. It's about cooperation. That's what we really need. MIT, roll your sleeves up. You're all super smart.
Okay, Winona, we're going to probably do one or two more questions, but we have a question from a student at MIT who thanks you for sharing your knowledge. She is a PhD student, and she's wondering what role you feel non-Indigenous researchers play in being allies through the work. She said she's conducting humanities, community-based research, and doing her best from a research alongside Indigenous communities that she's working with. She said, I am a brown, yellow-skinned woman of mixed ethnicities. She said, sometimes I feel as though I'm not supposed to be here at MIT because an Indigenous student could be in my position. She said, but given the circumstances, I want to give voice to Indigenous initiatives and futures and dreams. So any thoughts on that?
If you are there, you just do your best, woman. That's what I'd say. You got yourself in there, you just go. You go. And when I was an undergraduate, I used to work for Indian organizations, because I had nerdy research skills, as you might have gathered, and so those nerdy research skills, those are very helpful. Now I even need, I need people to help me, because I can't do as much research, and there's a lot of fields, that I don't really have a gift in. And so, applying academic knowledge and research skills to the just transition, that's your spot. MIT, that's your spot. All across this country, there are people that are working on this. And, I got questions like, rural co-op management and infrastructure equity. How is it that these rural co-ops that are, out of North Dakota and South Dakota, Minnesota, I know their boards are all white, but they make decisions that, build infrastructure for large industries and not for us. How's that happen? How do you transform infrastructure equity? So those are questions that are fairly answered in academic research applied in a social, a political, and a policy and a practical arena. There's a lot of opportunity for good work, coming from academia. And, you can find me at Honor the Earth if you ever want to help, because I need all kinds of help on a lot of research. This just transition work I'm working on. I got a pretty good idea on it, but I'm not an engineer,
Well, Winona, you're a lot of things. Do you have your hand in farming and sustainable renewable energies? And I've just seen you know of your work, and you're doing a lot. And on top of all of that, you're also writing. And would you talk about your new book, the water protectors and the what is it? The rise of
the rise of the water protectors. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jody, I
Yes.
work with a lot of people. I get to talk about it, but I could have built a solar thermal panel if you pay me $500. I'm like all thumbs with the drill. This is me, right? So work with good people. That's how you get stuff done, right? We know that. And train our next generation, right? You and I need a retirement plan. Mine's my grandchildren, teach them how to farm and raise stuff, right? And then, I'm privileged to be able to write. I mean, I'm probably like you. I like to write more than anything else. I get up early in the morning, before anybody asks me or says mom or grandma to me, try to get my writing in, and then, but this book that is coming out with, it's Fernwood Press with the Columbia University is distributing in the US, is about the stories of water protectors, and a lot of it is the writing that I've done over the past few years, chronicling these frontline struggles of people to protect their water, whether it is in the pipeline battles of, Standing Rock, Dakota Access, or the Hawaiians at Mauna Kea, or the Gitxsan-Wet'suwet'en, up in northern Canada. These are all the same kind of struggles of Indigenous people protecting sacred sites and protecting sacred water. And so I did my best to tell their stories. And that's with the stories that they asked me to share. And so that is what this book is. It's really I wish I had the leisure of many tenured professors or others to write, or a writing fellowship. If anybody wants to give me a writing fellowship, that'd be awesome. But I wrote these things, I scrapped them together, I wove them together into a book, stories that I had written over the past few years. And, Fernwood, it's my second book with Fernwood, but, just really wanted to honor these great people doing this great work.
And I had the privilege of being able to see kind of an advanced copy of the book, but the book is out December 1st. And I've really been enjoying what I've been reading so far. So I'd encourage people to get your pre-orders in. That said, Winona, we're kind of winding down here. So I would like to thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with everybody. And I want to say that on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank everybody for tuning into this Forum for Equity broadcast. And we'll be sure to forward any other questions that we have from the Q&A section to you, Winona. And I just like to take a minute and encourage people that would like to support or learn more about the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliances, which the organization that I have founded. Having worked in the mainstream press, I wanted to move back here to Fort Berthold, many, many years ago. It took me a while, but now that I'm here, I'm continuing the journalism work, but that's mainly to advocate for an independent press and freedom of information. As Winona, well, that a lot of that information doesn't always trickle down to our people. And with a stronger media connection, I know you have a radio station too. How's that going right now?
It's going good. That's one of the things during COVID, people go on Zoom. I mean, I don't know if I wish I had shares in Zoom, I mean, but our tribal radio stations are, they're COVID friendly, so, and we've tried to up our technology, and all of us have been trying to learn how to do like more stuff remote, because you want to be safe. And I'm proud of our tribal radio, and I want to just see more of us rocking it out.
Yeah. Yep. So support to the listeners out there, support independent, native-led media. And again, you can learn more on that on the Indigenous Media Freedom Alliance website. That all said, we're kind of rounding out to the top of the hour right now. So I want to remind the listeners that this broadcast will be available on the MIT Alumni Association YouTube channel within a week of today. And with that, again, thank you, Winona, for your time. And I know you're going to continue your travels through the Dakotas here on your way back home to Minnesota. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. A pleasure, as always, to see you, Jody, and wish you and your family the best, you know, up there in some trying times, but keep our heads up. You know, North Dakota is going to change, and our tribes are going to lead.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.